The Atlanta Thrashers entered the summer of 2009, and more specifically, unrestricted free agency, with a little more sense of urgency than usual. Their best player, and undeniable face of their franchise, superstar Ilya Kovalchuk, was in the final year of his contract, and with the franchise having little luck keeping top players, general manager Don Waddell knew in order to keep his iconic Thrasher, he'd not only have to fork over a ton of cash, he'd have to ice a better team around him as well. Entering his age 26 season, Ilya Kovalchuk, since he was 18 years old, had been one of the game's greatest goal scorers, a prolific shot generator with 2 50-goal seasons, 3 40-plus goal campaigns. Kovalchuk was already one of the greatest snipers of his generation, really only eclipsed by Alexander Ovechkin. But regardless of the individual heights Kovalchuk reached, the franchise did not follow. Established in 1999, the Thrashers had only reached the postseason once, and even that only lasted a few days in a first-round sweep. There was no guarantee, even if the money was right, that Ilya Kovalchuk wanted to spend the rest of his prime years on a losing team. Thus, Don Waddell got busy on the phones to shore up his squad. First up was trading for defenseman Pavel Kubina from the Toronto Maple Leafs. With a price tag of $5 million, he'd become the veteran anchor of a young top four that included Zach Bogosian, Ron Hainsey, and Tobias Enstrom. The following day, Waddell opened up the purse strings a bit more, bringing in towering forward 6'6" Nick Antropov, who cashed in on his career-high 59 points with Toronto and ending the season in New York with a 4-year deal worth $16 million. Antropov and Kovalchuk had played a bit together during the 2004 lockout in Russia, and although he was mostly a wing in Toronto, he would shift to the middle and become Kovalchuk's new number 1 center. Also adding 4th overall pick Evander Kane to the mix, Don Waddell had done a solid job infusing some new productive faces to the roster. However, the most underrated addition may have been his most valuable, training camp invite Maxim Afinogenov. Afinogenov at this point in his career had been in the league 10 years, but was still only 29 years old and was ultra talented. Although it is a bit odd looking back, he'd have to settle for a training camp invite, what seems like such a cliche for Russian scorers of the 2000s, especially in my short-lived YouTube channel, since I've done videos on Alexei Kovalev and Alexander Semin already. Please check out those videos on my page, and also please subscribe if you are enjoying this one. But as the Russian cliche goes, Afinogenov had the reputation of being inconsistent offensively and not very trustworthy defensively. However, in fairness to him, unlike other highly skilled Russian forwards, we never truly got to see him unleashed as a top-line 18-plus minute scorer consistently. Growing up in Buffalo under Lindy Ruff, who often had Afinogenov in the doghouse, the most ice time he ever received was in the 2006 season, skating a shade over 17 minutes with Derek Roy and Thomas Vanek, and not surprisingly, scored 61 points in 56 games, nearly a 90-point pace. But that deployment was pretty rare for him in a decade in Buffalo. It was that flip of the coin, who knows what we're getting type reputation was the reason Buffalo didn't retain his services. But it seemed like a no-brainer, low-risk addition for Atlanta who could use some scoring. And as a bonus, surround Kovalchuk with another Russian. And if you think about it, it was a perfect match. If there was ever a franchise who didn't mind sacrificing some defensive integrity for offense, it was your Atlanta Thrashers. Maxim would sign a 1-year deal worth $800,000. Head coach John Anderson started with the first line consisting of Kovalchuk with Brian Little and newly signed Nick Antropov. The captain started off hot, scoring 7 goals in the team's first 5 games, and amazingly, the Thrashers had their greatest start ever to a season, winning 4 of the first 5 games. However, with neither Antropov or Little scoring in the team's first 7 games, Anderson decided to shake up his top 6. He would reunite the great trio from the year before, the Little White Russian line, consisting of Todd White, Slava Kozlov, and Brian Little, and giving their camp invite Maxim Afinogenov a shot on the top line with Kovalchuk and Antropov. Afinogenov started the year averaging around 13 minutes of ice time, all while adjusting to playing for a new team and a new coach for the first time in his career. In his first game with the line of promotion, he'd click immediately, scoring a goal and an assist, skating 17 minutes, with the entire line each having 2 points, But just as the Thrashers thought they put together a productive top six, they'd get a taste of what life may be like without Ilya Kovalchuk, as he broke a bone in his foot the following game. Coming at the time of a 2-game losing streak and dropping the next 2 without Kovalchuk, alarm bells of the same old Thrashers started ringing already. Only this time, it can not only cost them a season, but their best player ever. Skating 22 minutes a night, saying Ilya Kovalchuk was a big part of the Thrashers' offense was a massive understatement. He was the sun that the entire Thrashers universe revolved around. Most saw this injury as the start of a huge nosedive on their season. But surprisingly, the Thrashers didn't do too bad. They slowed the bleeding, winning the next 2 with Antropov and Afinogenov combining for 5 points, and overall go 4-3 in Kovalchuk's absence. Nick Antropov, still goalless on the season, had 8 assists in 7 Kovalchuk-less games, and Afinogenov 6 points. But more importantly, his ice time increased to 18 minutes in that span, including some games over 19. And in quick time, Maxim in 3 weeks had gained the trust of his head coach and found his game. Just in time to take advantage of his confidence, Kovalchuk was ready to come back. Suiting up closer to the 3-week time frame versus the worst-case 5-week timeline, Kovalchuk returned against the New York Rangers on November 12, 2009, and dominated as if he never left, skating over 20 minutes, scoring a goal and 2 assists, along with 6 shots on net. Afinogenov had 4 shots of his own, along with a goal, skating 19 minutes, and Nick Antropov continued his newly found passing proficiency with 2 more assists in 20 minutes. I say newly found, considering Antropov's career high in assists was 31, and he already had 15 apples in his first 15 games of the year. The next night, the top line kept the momentum going, crushing the LA Kings in a 7-0 thrashing. Kovalchuk and Maxim Afinogenov each had 4 points, and the trio combined for a +9 on the night. And as November rolled along, the top line and the Thrashers became one of the hottest stories in hockey. Including Kovalchuk's return against the Rangers, Atlanta went 7-1-2 the rest of November, helping the Thrashers surge up the standings, good enough for 5th in the Eastern Conference and 12th best record in the NHL. The newly formed first line was a huge reason for the team's success. Finally given the opportunity to be a top-line player, the electric Maxim Afinogenov led the way, finishing 4th in league-wide November scoring with 18 points in 14 games, thanks to his unreal speed and scoring touch that Buffalo fans wished they saw more of the previous decade. Nick Antropov couldn't shake the bad puck luck in the scoring department. However, he still had a very good month, while providing tremendous net front presence for the team. And in a nice change for the Thrashers, they had themselves a very good 5-man unit in the plus-minus department, with the D pair of Tobias Enstrom and Pavel Kabina having a great month at even strength. And as far as Kovalchuk, well, he did normal Kovalchuk things. Even with missing the first week of the month, he unsurprisingly finished top 10 in scoring. The vibes in Atlanta were positive, and the franchise had their eyes set on a second postseason berth. But there was only one problem. Ilya Kovalchuk was still not signed. And while that black cloud of doubt cleared up a bit with the winning, the calendar flipped to December and the team regressed, playing .500 hockey. And with each passing day making it less likely Kovalchuk would stay in Atlanta, each loss became magnified and rumors started to swirl on what was going on. Until late December, when Don Waddell finally cleared up the rumors, contract negotiations hit a snag. And with that ominous update, whether coincidence or not, following the acknowledgement that its greatest player may not be staying in Atlanta, the Thrashers went winless in the next 9 games. Although you still have to give Kovalchuk credit. If this process was supposed to distract him, no one sent him the memo. In December, he put up 17 points in 15 games and said all the right things publicly. Whether it became an issue in the locker room or not, Kovy handled the situation very professionally. Nick Antropov finally got rewarded for his play with 8 goals in December, while Afinogenov cooled off from his November heater, scoring only 10 points in 15 games, which got anchored down by a 5-game pointless drought. December definitely put a damper not only on Kovalchuk's situation, but the season itself. The team would go 4-10-1. In January, things stabilized a bit, although it was far from great hockey, going 6-5-4, which presented another issue for GM Don Waddell. Had the team collapsed, it would have made the picture a lot clearer. Kovalchuk would have to be dealt with another losing season. However, the Thrashers by early February were only a point out of a playoff spot. And it's not like the offense slowed down. Kovalchuk himself had another over point per game month, showing continued great chemistry with all of his Russian-speaking line mates, including another combined 9-point performance against the Islanders on January 1st. And while there had been rumblings that Waddell had started to field trade offers for Kovalchuk, it still seemed the top priority was to ink him to a long-term contract. And then, on February 3rd, a bombshell rumor hit NHL media outlets. Ilya Kovalchuk had been told to expect a trade at any moment. And later that afternoon, General Manager Don Waddell addressed that report. Ultimately, we offered Kovy more than $101 million over 12 years, which would have been the highest contract signed by an impending unrestricted free agent in the history of the league. If accepted, this contract would have been the second highest offer ever to any NHL player. We also met his desire to be the highest paid player based on average annual salary, with a separate offer of 7 years at $10 million per year. This offer is $0.5 million higher per year than any other player. Therefore, we are aggressively exploring all of our options as we move forward. And literally, just hours from this statement, the trigger was pulled. Ilya Kovalchuk, just months away from being possibly the most valuable unrestricted free agent in the history of hockey, was gone from Atlanta. Even with the unfortunate circumstances around Kovalchuk's departure from the franchise, it certainly was not a reflection on the free agent additions of Maxim Afinogenov and Nick Antropov, who did a hell of a job on the first line. Nick Antropov, playing first-line center for the first time of his career, took over 1,000 faceoffs, nearly quadrupling his previous high. Having 42 points in the 51 games with Kovalchuk still in Atlanta, he'd amazingly turn up the production in Kovy's absence, leading the Thrashers in scoring with 25 points in the remaining 24 games. Antropov, skating with mostly Afinogenov and rookie Nicholas Bergfors, who was acquired in the Kovalchuk trade, ended the year with a career-high and team-leading 43 assists and 67 points. Maxim Afinogenov had what would end up being his final season in the NHL, but it was a wonderful comeback campaign nonetheless. By the Kovalchuk trade, he had 17 goals and 44 points in 55 games. For context of what his last Buffalo days were like, he had 48 points combined in his final 2 injury-riddled seasons in Buffalo. Without a doubt, one of the best value contracts in the NHL, providing top 6 production at $800,000, Maxim Afinogenov ended the season skating a career-high 17 minutes and 24 seconds, and finished second on Atlanta with 61 points, while playing in all 82 games for the first time in his career. So that begs the question, if Antropov and Afinogenov weren't to blame, who was? The fact remains, the Thrashers had to part with another elite player. In return, Don Waddell received Nicholas Bergfors, Johnny Aduya, Patrice Cormier, and a first-round pick. A lot of questions remained after the deal, especially for GM Don Waddell. As far as the timing, did he just make the trade too early? Although he did wait until the deadline with Marian Hossa, with also underwhelming returns, could he have possibly extracted more on deadline day for Kovalchuk? Did he also make a mistake of not allowing teams to explore contract talks with Kovalchuk in combination with a possible trade? You can ask for a lot more if teams aren't taking on a rental player. And while we now realize the monstrous offer made to Kovalchuk's camp, was that number available the previous year or even in the summer? It's a lot easier for a player to say no so close to July 1st. Or in the end, is it possible Ilya Kovalchuk, with the constant losing and uncertainty in ownership, just did not want to sign an extension with Atlanta? And all this contract talk for months was just a way to have a baseline offer to shop around to other franchises? And if so, is it the GM's job to realize that? Another area worth exploring, could the Thrashers just have gone for it and self-buy at the deadline, keeping Kovalchuk? Some would argue for the return they got, why not go for it and maybe make some noise in the playoffs? Maybe that would act as the ultimate carrot to dangle for Kovalchuk, hockey in Atlanta actually working. Nicholas Bergfors, who actually did a solid job to end the year, leading the team with 83 shots in 27 games, just wasn't a big enough prospect for the level of player they were trading. Atlanta did not collapse after the trade, going 11, 10, and 5, with many of those being one-goal losses, and only missing the playoffs by 5 points. I mean, who knows what happens if they keep Kovalchuk. But, as many predicted, although maybe in the end it wouldn't have mattered, the Ilya Kovalchuk trade did end up being the death nail of hockey in Atlanta, as the team only survived one more season. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe for more line combo content.